Good afternoon. Well, we are very excited that later today, the President will sign an executive order that takes a whole-of-government approach to securing critical U.S. supply chains, ensuring we can withstand crises and create good-paying jobs in the process. The COVID-19 pandemic has underlined the need for resilient supply chains and robust domestic manufacturing, so all Americans have access to essential goods and services in times of crisis. The EO will direct immediate 100-day reviews of supply chains for critical products that go into everything from phones to pharmaceuticals. It will also direct reviews of industrial-based sectors, including defense, public health and biological preparedness, information and communications technology, transportation, energy, and food production. This is an issue with strong bipartisan support, and later this afternoon, the President will meet with a bipartisan group of House and Senate members to discuss supply chain resilience and the need to work together in strengthening it. We'll provide you all a list of that later this afternoon as it's finalized. Joining us today to talk through the details of the executive order our Deputy Director of the National Economic Council, Samira Fazili. I may have butchered your last name, as mine is butchered sometimes. I'll keep working on it. And Senior Director of International Economics and Competitiveness at the NSC, Peter Harrell. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see if we have time to take a couple questions. They have good reason. They have to go see the President shortly. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jen, and thanks to all of you. It's a privilege for me to be here. As Jen said, this afternoon, the President will sign an executive order that takes a critical step in ensuring that America's supply chains can withstand any crisis, as well as supporting jobs across the country. Last year, in the early months of the pandemic, frontline healthcare workers couldn't find the masks, gloves, and PPE that they needed to keep themselves safe as they treated COVID-19 patients. Today, automakers across the country are having to take workers off factory lines because they can't get access to enough computer chips to maintain full production. Last July, President Biden committed that as president, he would direct his administration to take a comprehensive approach to securing America's supply chains. He said then, and he will reiterate later today, that America should never face shortages of critical products in times of crisis. Our supply chain should not be vulnerable to manipulation by competitor nations. The EO that the President will sign later today formally launches the initiative President Biden committed to last year to build strong and resilient supply chains. This is the first whole-of-government approach to promoting the resilience of America's supply chains from pharmaceuticals to foods. We are going to get out of the business of reacting to supply chain crises as they arise and get into the business of preventing future supply chain problems. As Jen said, the EO the President will sign will direct immediate 100-day reviews of supply chains for 4 critical products: computer chips for everything from cars to phones, large capacity batteries, such as those used in electric cars, so that America leads in making next generation electric vehicles, pharmaceuticals and active pharmaceutical ingredients, the key ingredients to American medicines, and critical minerals and strategic materials such as rare earth minerals that are essential to American industry and to America's defense base. The EO will also direct 6 sector-specific reviews to be completed within 1 year of today to be focused on defense, public health and biological preparedness, information and communications technology, transportation, energy, and food production. These sectoral reviews will be modeled after the process that the Defense Department uses to regularly evaluate and strengthen America's defense and industrial base. Make no mistake, we are not simply planning to order up reports. We are going to be taking actions to close gaps as we identify them, just as we have been working with industry in recent weeks to ensure that U.S. automobile manufacturers have the parts they need to keep making cars here in America. But we expect that by taking this type of comprehensive approach to supply chain resilience, we'll be able to strengthen our supply chains for the long term. And with that, I'm happy to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Samira.
Thank you, Peter. Creating more resilient supply chains is an opportunity for our country to come together to create well-paying jobs for workers across our country. That is why today's action reinforces the President's overarching commitment to help our country build back better. We know that even before the COVID crisis, the economy was not working for most Americans. Worker pay was too low. Many families could not make ends meet. Many of the jobs that served as the heart of the middle class had been lost due to changes in both technology and the structure of the global economy. Disruption is inevitable, but over the past few years, we have moved from crisis to crisis when some essential product was suddenly in short supply. What we need is a capacity to respond quickly when hit by a challenge. This executive order moves the whole government towards being more prepared. These sector-specific reviews that the President orders today, we're going to be asking agencies to do the following. They're going to review risks in supply chains and in our domestic industrial base. They're going to think broadly about risk. There's climate risk and geopolitical risk, but there's also risk in not having enough workers ready to meet the needs of that sector, or enough factories or the right equipment to make a good or retool a shift to a new spike in demand for an essential good. They're going to be recommending actions to improve resiliency. In some instances, that action might be the data that government can publish, and so the private sector can plan and mobilize and take action. But in other instances, we have levers like procurement authority that we can use to support stockpiling or support some level of domestic production. We are also going to be looking for opportunities to work with Congress to give us more tools so that we can improve our preparedness. And today's conversation with members of Congress is going to be part of an ongoing conversation we've been having with them on this. Finally, a big part of this executive order is consultation with stakeholders and experts. We are going to be reaching out to talk to the American people. Government action alone will not solve complex supply chain challenges. This is going to be broad engagement, broad conversations that will include business, labor, local communities, academia. This work is going to require a new commitment to public-private partnerships, and we need all voices at that table to help us design those partnerships. This is a real opportunity to invest in the future of America and build on our nation's strengths. There are opportunities for small business development to help diversify supplier networks and alleviate the risk of too-big-to-fail companies in the supply chains for critical goods. There are opportunities to improve worker readiness and training so they have the skills needed to ramp up research, production, or distribution of a critical good. And there are opportunities to bring more jobs to communities around the country, including communities of color, to leverage the ingenuity and grit of the American people. This is going to leverage U.S. scientific leadership. It's going to further advance our research and development prowess. It will do so while also recognizing that our ability to maintain our innovative edge in research requires us to invest in both research and manufacturing in communities across America. Because when you pair thinkers and doers, that's how you create the technologies and products that help us tackle tomorrow's challenges. I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said. This work is not going to be about America going it alone. The answer to these weaknesses is not always to ramp up domestic production. We know these vulnerabilities affect not just American households. It's a global problem in some of these supply chains. We are committed to working with partners and allies to reduce these vulnerabilities that are affecting all of us. The work ahead builds upon America's historic legacy of making strategic investments in our future that lay the foundation for broad-based economic growth. Smart investments in research, manufacturing, domestic capacity, and our workforce has in the past unleashed decades of economic expansion, and an expansion that raised wages and living standards for American families across the country. We can and should build upon that legacy, and that is how we will approach this supply chain work. This problem was decades in the making. We can solve it by making smart investments that are long-term in nature, that reach families and workers in all of America. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we can take some questions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Presidents for decades have been promising to create factory jobs. We've got about 12.2 million factory jobs. That's down from 17 million in 2000. How many jobs do you think this initiative can create? And what are your metrics of success?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think it's important to have a broad lens and broad view on how you measure the jobs and the job creation in the manufacturing space, because manufacturing is doesn't just support and create jobs in the manufacturing sector. There are broad spillover effects that it has. There are going to be R&D jobs here, research jobs here. There's going to be jobs in the kind of supplier networks in the services industry. So I think we have to start tracking and understanding that manufacturing's contributions to our economy can't just be narrowly counted in that way. That's what I would suggest.
Jennifer? When you talk about incentivizing and funding on the budget the upcoming budget, do you think that you will propose some sort of federal funding to help increase the supply of semiconductors?
We are still in the process of formulating the budget, so at this time, I'm not able to talk in specifics about the budget proposal, but what I would say is we are looking forward to talking with members of Congress about what more we can do in partnership with them to give us the funds we need.
And
on that, just like to step back for a moment. Obviously, we're talking about multiple different supply chains here, and I think that the solutions we will be proposing and implementing will vary a little bit by supply chain. The supply chain for semiconductors obviously looks quite different from the supply chain for rare earths. So I think what you're going to see is us come forward with a comprehensive suite of recommendations that will be tailored for each of the different critical goods that we are looking at. In general, across the board, we're expecting we'll be using a mix of incentives to encourage production here, looking at ways to ensure there's surge capacity available for things that might need to be ramped up quickly, stockpiling, working with our allies and partners to make sure that we have cross-border open flows with our allies and partners where we might collectively need to take some action. So I think we're really going to be looking at a range of different tools here, not just any particular single tool.
Defense Production Act, would you think that the White House would consider using the Defense Production Act specifically for the semiconductors?
I don't think we're here to talk about how we would use the DPA on any particular supply chain at this point, but clearly, as we look at making resilient supply chains across the board, all tools are on the table for this administration.
And then on Taiwan, can you say, how has Taiwan reacted to some of your requests for assistance on this? Have they been receptive to your pleas for help on boosting the supplies of the chips?
I don't want to get into the nuances of specific diplomatic conversations we have had. Clearly, Taiwan is an important partner of the United States, and we've had constructive conversations with them.
I'm sorry we have to let them go, but I know there's a lot of interest in this, and we can do follow-up questions afterwards as well. But thank you both so much for joining us at the briefing, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of additional items at the top. As you heard in our COVID public health briefing just a few minutes ago, starting next month, we will begin to deliver millions of masks to food banks and community health centers around the country. These are two nationwide networks that disproportionately serve hard-hit populations. Today, many low-income Americans still lack access to this basic protection. That's why we're taking this thoughtful and targeted action to keep Americans safe. We will deliver more than 25 million masks across the country. These masks will be available at at more than 1,300 community health centers and around 60,000 food pantries. Any American who needs a mask will be able to walk into these health centers or food pantries and pick up a high-quality American-made mask that is consistent with CDC guidance. This program is made possible through existing funding at HHS, and with this action, we are hoping to level the playing field, giving vulnerable populations quality, well-fitting masks. A couple other things. I know, lots going on today. I wanted to make sure you saw a letter released this morning by over 160 CEOs representing some of America's biggest and most respected companies, calling on Congress to act on the President's rescue plan. There is growing consensus across the country for this package, and that's reflected in polling showing a bipartisan majority of Americans back it. As the more than 160 business leaders put in their letter to congressional leaders, previous federal relief measures have been essential, but more must be done to put the country on a trajectory for a strong and durable recovery. Also, a winter storm update. Temperatures are back within normal ranges for this time of year across the states that have been impacted by the storm. That's, of course, good news. But water system outages and boil water advisories, although improving, remain an ongoing issue across the region, requiring additional federal support. Delayed shipments of COVID-19 vaccine doses are anticipated to be filled in the coming days, as we noted last week, and vaccination sites have reopened and are doubling up appointments to accommodate those canceled last week. All major airports are open. All rail carriers have returned to normal operations. Interstate and state highways are open. Transit agencies are returning to normal operations, and ports are operating under normal circumstances. Federal assistance continues. We noted the additional 31 counties yesterday, and of course, we'll continue to consider additional requests moving forward. Finally, to remain transparent with you and the American people, we wanted to share that the president tested negative for COVID-19 on Monday. We will venture to provide this update the following day in the future, but this is part of our regular COVID safety protocols that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. The entire White House complex, as you know, continues to adhere to strict mask wearing, social distancing, and other mitigation strategies. Okay, sorry, a few things at the top. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. On the masks, any sense of why the White House is using cloth masks instead of N95s, which are also made in America? We have supplies. And do you have a list of manufacturers of the masks?
Sure. Well, I would say that these masks are all adhere to CDC guidelines, and certainly they meet those requirements set by our federal standard. And just tell me your second question again.
A list of the manufacturers of the masks.
I don't have a list of those. I can see if there's more details we can provide.
Okay. And then separately, Vladimir Putin said today that Russia's going to redouble its efforts on opposing foreign powers who he says are basically trying to undermine Russia. Does the White House believe that tensions with Russia are increasing?
Well, we believe that certainly over the last several years, there have been more concerning steps that have been taken by Vladimir Putin and by members of the Kremlin, as the president has expressed during the campaign. And that is why he asked his national security team to launch a process of looking into not only reports of hacking around the 2020 election, but also the bounties on our troops that was of concern, of course, the SolarWinds hack, and to take a close look at that so we have our own assessment. As you know, the president also spoke with President Putin just maybe 2 weeks ago and did not hold back in expressing his concerns about the actions of his government. But we are letting that process see itself through. As I noted yesterday, it will be weeks, not months, before it's concluded, and we have more details about a response. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just wanted to see if you could confirm that the president is speaking with King Salman of Saudi Arabia today, and if he'll do that in advance of the report on Khashoggi coming out.
Well, as we've noted in the past, we remain committed to releasing through the DNI, of course, an unclassified report that we expect to happen soon. I don't have an updated timeline for you on that. I know there were also reports on a proposed call. We also expect that to happen soon. We're still in the process of scheduling when that will happen.
Okay. And what are they going to be talking about in that call?
Well, when we have the call and the president has the call, I'm sure we'll do a readout of it. Of course, we've had engagements at many levels with the Saudis to date, but we'll do a readout once we conclude the call.
Do you have a status update on Neera Tanden with all of the delays on Capitol Hill as far as her confirmation?
And tell me more about what you mean by that.
An update as far as whether you're going to withdraw that name. It doesn't seem like the votes are there for her at this point.
Well, let me first state that, as the president repeated yesterday, we're fighting for her nomination, and she and our team remain in close contact and close touch with senators and key constituency groups. She's an expert whose qualifications are critical during this time of an unprecedented crisis, and she has rolled up her sleeves. She's very engaged in doing outreach to senators, to members on the Hill, answering any questions they have and offering to do that, and we're doing the same. I know there was an announcement about a delay of a confirmation vote today, and they put out a statement to make clear that, of course, they're going to do due diligence, as are we, to continue that outreach and continue to fight for her nomination.
Follow, Jen?
Go.
Jen, thank you. How big of a setback does the White House view the fact that the Senate committees have delayed the vote on her confirmation to be?
Well, again, they put out the statement from the leadership of the committee conveying clearly that they wanted to continue to do work to build support for her nomination.
Does the White House see this as a setback to Neera Tanden's confirmation?
I wouldn't put it in those terms. I think we are committed to continuing to fight for all of our nominees, continuing to do the outreach needed, to answer questions, to address concerns anyone has, to reiterate the qualifications of all of the nominees that the president has put forward, and to do due diligence in fighting for the team he's nominated.
Even if she is confirmed, does it undercut the president's budget agenda to have this confirmation delayed?
Well, as I noted a couple of times here, but it's worth repeating, Neera Tanden has a record of working with people who disagree with her, working with people who have different viewpoints and different objectives and priorities, and that's something she would certainly take into the job if she's confirmed.
And just one more, Jen. Richard Shelby has said he would support the confirmation of Shalonda Young. What is your reaction to that? Is she a potential replacement should Neera Tanden not follow through?
Well, there's one nominee to lead the budget department. Her name's Neera Tanden, and that's who we're continuing to fight for.
Discussions about Shalonda Young?
We are focused on fighting for the person the president has nominated. Go ahead, Caitlin.
On Neera Tanden, one more follow-up on that. Has she offered to withdraw her nomination yet?
We are working in close touch with Neera Tanden and with members of Congress on continuing to do the outreach and engagement to fight for her confirmation. That's where our focus is.
But no yes or no whether she's offered to withdraw.
That's not the stage we're in, Caitlin. Where the stage we're in is working to continue to fight for her nomination. And as you know, it's a numbers game, right? It's a matter of getting one Republican to support her nomination. We're continuing to do that outreach, answer questions they have, and continue to reiterate her qualifications.
And on the call with King Salman that's expected to happen, you said you're still working on scheduling it. Does President Biden want the Saudi Crown Prince to be on that call?
The president's intention, as is the intention of this government, is to recalibrate our engagement with Saudi Arabia and